I thank you very much for this kind introduction, and I would like to thank the organizer to inviting me, and also as a local neurologist here, I would like to express warm welcome to all the patients, all their carers, and all my colleagues who are here in Ljubljana. I hope not for the first time. In the remaining 15 minutes, what I will try, because I don't want to rob you of coffee. Coffee, some people believe will protect you against further development of Alzheimer. So we'll have coffee on time, I promise you. But I will try to tackle an interesting, if somehow still disappointing topic on prevention of Alzheimer's disease. Yes, we all know that Alzheimer's disease is a devastating disease, that patient to a certain degree and then the carer would fight against it and then many times be left by try to also unproven, unscientific treatments, and of course people who, let's say, who have genetic form or who have their Alzheimer in their family, they would somehow hope to prevent the disease. Can it be prevented? To respond to this, first of all, we have to understand what is going on in the brain of patient with Alzheimer's disease. And in these 2-3 days, you will hear a lot about the bad proteins lumping in the brain, about amyloid, about tau. Now, for the scientist, it's very important to try and understand how amyloid and tau is building up. What is the cascade? If we understand the cascades, then we will be able to use some strategies, for example, vaccination, immunotherapy, or similar things. So, first of all, we must understand the basic process. This is why I must join to Professor Winblad's appeal. This basic science is so important. In the first instance, we can say, oh, but I don't care about all these mice and all these molecules and so on. I want the drug. I want somebody to help me. But basically, we will be able to help you if we understand what is going in the brain. So this is the precondition to talk about treatment, about the prevention. And then also our life observation. We know nowadays, observing the patient, we know that you get Alzheimer when you are elderly. Very rarely one can get Alzheimer in their 20s or 30s, very rarely. Then we know that being an elderly woman puts you at particular risk, not only because women live longer. There's something else there. Then we know if you just complain about a bad memory, but your neurologist sort of dismisses you, oh, it's nothing, you're overburdened. But if you feel it and if you complain it, there's a increased risk that actually in 3 years' time you will end up with Alzheimer's disease. So neurologists, psychiatrists, general physicians has to take you seriously. That's mild cognitive impairment, and you will hear a lot about this entity. Then we know that certain genetic alleles, like strange name ApoE4, but this, if I've got the alleles of ApoE4, it makes me more prone to Alzheimer. On the other hand, if I'm having some other alleles called ApoE2, I'm sort of relatively protected against it. Then if in my family there are people with Alzheimer, unfortunately my chances are bigger. And then there are beautiful studies about education. One published in 2012 in the brain, Eclipse, the scientists will know it by the name of Eclipse, looked at over 800 people who, some of them got demented, and looked their level of education. And what they found that if you are highly educated, if you've got higher education, more years of education, then your brain looks the same as in dementia, but you don't express signs and symptoms of dementia. So physically, your brain cannot be distinguished by somebody, but for some reason you are not, you don't have signs and symptoms, you don't have clinical picture. So here we are. There are probably risk factors which at the moment we cannot change. And there are risk factors which we can change. Maybe there is 1/3 to genetic factors and 2/3 to the factors which we can somehow influence. So that's a good news. Which factors are beyond our control? Well, certainly for the time being age, and to a large degree genetics, although perhaps in the next 2 years, we'll be able to tell you that we can deal also with genetics. In the genetic, there are certain genes which occur in people who get the Alzheimer's early. There are 3 chromosomes. I will not bore you with the names of the chromosomes. But then also, if you get your Alzheimer later in your disease, there is this gene which is associated with larger possibility of getting Alzheimer, which I've mentioned, ApoE4. So these are factors which we largely, unfortunately, cannot influence very much. Now, as I've told you, understanding of what is going in the brain, so putting lots of energy and effort in the basic studies will tell us what's going on in the brain, and to a large degree they will reveal also how genes influence what is going on in the brain. Now, what about those factors which we are more interested in, which we can influence, and we can influence a lot? Now, it seems that about 80% of people who have dementia have also something associated with heart and vessels, cardiovascular link, it's called. More than 80% of people. And some, there are some people who have vast changes, amyloid, bad proteins in their brain, but they don't get Alzheimer symptoms. Why? We don't understand completely. Some people say, well, you need an additional lesion from heart or from vessels, cardiovascular. But we know that if we decrease cardiovascular risks, if we have our blood pressure okay, if we control for our diabetes, this insulin resistance is a hot issue among scientists, so we are doing lots of research on this. We also know that clearing up your vessels of the plaques, which we can do with this anti-cholesterol drugs, statins, there are some studies which would say we could help. Then it was mentioned that inflammation and anti-inflammatory drugs may be beneficial. We'll see the role of stress. Now, a little stress for a short time, not bad for anybody. It keeps us, going on from day to day. But stress, which is going on for months and years, very bad for you. It influences particularly, it physically destroys part of the brain which is important for memory hippocampus. It physically destroys the cells. So one should avoid long-lasting stress. The role of sleep was recently sort of trying to clarify it, and it was shown that there is an increased burden of amyloid, so increased risk for dementia if I'm lacking sleep. Then there was some suggestion, then, some people said, okay, I'll just sleep, 24 hours per day, there will be no dementia. Not true. There are some indices that perhaps too much sleep may also not be good for our cognition. And then the role of head trauma. You will hear and read about fearsome, somehow horrifying reports from America when all these sportsmen, who were very active, particularly with this contact sport where you banged your head a lot, boxers, American football, and so on. It's a little epidemics of dementia now, and large monies for suing and so on. So the role of head trauma now is coming on the stage, and it's so simple to wear the helmet, to physically take care about your head. Then, of course, you will read a lot about antioxidants. One has to really understand the basic science and what is going on to understand, and you will read about vitamin E, about vitamin C, about selenium. You will see most of the studies which you will read about are conflicting. So the jury is still out. We are still needing more research and data. And as I've mentioned to you, there is a gender difference in Alzheimer's. So elderly women particularly are at risk. So there must be something with estrogen as well. And there are trials which also tap into this hormonal strategy. It was told today a few times how important it is to detect and then to treat Alzheimer as soon as possible. If we start treating it very late, then there will be very little success, and perhaps one of the failures of many, many trials. We were so disappointing in the last 10 years. So many trials, nothing came out. Maybe we just chose the patients too late and the wrong patients. And why I put this into bold, exercising regularly and social and intellectual activities, because there are firm suggestions that physically exercising, being socially engaged, thinking a lot really helps. This was shown in animals, this was shown in people, this was shown with imaging. So there's this beautiful study about social, it was published, I think, in Journal of Alzheimer's Disease. A large population of Chinese from Shanghai, they would be put into 4 groups. One would be doing Tai Chi. One would be having intense social discussions. One would walk briskly, and one would have no intervention. And physically, the brain increased in Tai Chi and in social engagement, and there was also neuropsychological improvement. Interestingly, walking here came out as a negative, just to illustrate it, how confusing this field is, how many studies will show, walk briskly, then the other study will say, no, you just do Tai Chi or some aerobic or anaerobic, and some will say, no, I don't walk, just read, and so on. So, but here we are. I would just like to mention something. Most of these studies, which are, as I told you, confusing, come from studies on large population group. So somebody who is having perfectly controlled all risk factors, he can get Alzheimer. And somebody who smokes, who has enormous blood pressure, who is having diabetes, who is obese, who is having, I don't know, 22 more, and who never goes out of his bed or couch and popcorn and television, and he will never get Alzheimer's disease. So it's large population group. So we can talk about associations. We cannot prove cause and effect. We would love to have clinical trials with placebo, controlled, randomly assigned. This is when we then become sort of, self-confident. But in many cases in the field of Alzheimer's, such randomized placebo-controlled are difficult. You can't say somebody, okay, you are randomized not to move, not to walk, not to do exercise. You are randomized not to read. You can't do that. So a little bit of disappointment for the time being. When you are next time in Ljubljana in 15 years, 10, 15 years, maybe this will be different. But for the time being, it's not possible to say that AD can be prevented. However, ongoing studies clearly suggest that certain lifestyles, activities, substances might reduce the effect of possible AD risk factors. And these are mental, these are social, and these are physical. So what I would suggest you, I would strongly advise you to remain young, remain in your 30s if possible. Do you know who is this lady on the left? Margaret Thatcher, yeah. And who is the young gentleman on the right?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. So,
Long time ago.
unfortunately, they did not succeed to remain. Be cool and relaxed. This we can do. We can all do, yeah? Then avoid stress, because it will physically destroy your brain, particularly if stress is long-lasting. And then have a lunch in Piran. Piran, if you do not know, is a beautiful Mediterranean city along a very short 42, 49 kilometers of Slovenian coast, but it's got a beautiful city, a medieval city. It's called Piran. Why in Piran? Because you will eat all these things, and now read in the literature and listen to the posters why going to Piran to lunch is a good idea. Then think and learn, because if thinking and learning, you will create new cells in hippocampus, in the part which is important for memory. Learn Slovenian. Why? Because they say that bilingualism is very good. They say that it's not important at the end to know the language, but to learn it, grammar. And grammar, Slovenian grammar is one of the most sophisticated. So it's a good, and by the way, I don't know if you know, these are the first letters, the first words written in Slovenian about year 1900 and something. It's very ancient language, and that from all Slavonic languages is the first words written in this Latin scripts. And it says, if your father or grandfather would not sin, then things would be better. So it's got this sort of, ethical. Walk and row in Bled. Why? Not only because Bled is beautiful, but because there are absolutely studies which show that moving around, walking around is good. But don't do it alone. There are people and there are creatures around us, from our birth to our end, who will help us, who will keep going. And as I've told you, this Shanghai study and some other studies, there's a beautiful study also in international psychogeriatrics, which shows that keeping, it's not important the number of friends. What matters is really the quality of the relationships. And I will end here. Thank you very much.